games from their own COVID-19 outbreak. Tanner Pearson picking up a couple of third-period goals to lead the way. 2 goals as well for Brandon Sutter. Elsewhere in the NHL, it's the LA Kings up 3.
This is going bad. This expandable.
Canadians, I'm Charles. It's a great night for Canadian Comics. And it's earlier tonight when we opened the show.
These expandable drop-down notifications are stupid. The notification thing that swipes side to side, or you can tap on, that's fine. Just drop down within the thing. That's stupid, because I can drop down and then scroll inside of that. That's too much.
And we can now say that. We don't have to say in the death of and the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Don't act like you didn't want to say it. If you're in a different country, you could have got away with this stupid.
Kamala Harris,
too liberal. That's why
Vice President of the United States, the first person of color Vice President.
The one good thing about Alberta, all that oil smoke keeps
and as I was
people on that
ripping
side,
a little bit out
virtual wall
talking about how I'm handicapped in the conversation. And when I say that, what I mean is
it's way more interesting than this.
In every important conversation that we have on this program, I like to be as empathetic as possible. I want to be able to walk a mile in someone's shoes. But on the question of race, that's impossible. The question of ethnicity, heritage, it's impossible. It cannot be something I'm not. I have to be white. I can't be black. I try to
Michael Jackson
listen as much as I can. I try to have a feel for what that must be like. But I was suggesting earlier tonight that I don't know what it's like to have a black son. I don't know what it's like to have a son I don't have, that I would give instructions to on a regular basis to make sure they're as cautious as possible. There are some black parents who have a checklist of things that they repeatedly offer their kids, but especially their sons, about how to stay alive. Why? Because you're a target. Because of the color of your skin. I don't know what that's like. I don't know what it's like to be a visible target. But I do know how I felt when the verdict came down. Because the first thing I thought to myself was that, thank goodness, at least now, when that conversation is had, black father, black mother, black grandparent to a black son, at least one can say that on this particular day in history, on April 20th, 2021, there was some justice, or at least some accountability, to try to remedy a serious injustice, which, by the way, could never have happened without a young woman called Frazier, F-R-A-Z-I-E-R, a 17-year-old. Miss Frazier was on the scene. She had a cell phone. She took it out. She had video of what was done to George Floyd. Without that video, nobody has any doubt. We had Ari Goldkind on earlier, our legal expert. No one has any doubt that former police officer Derek Chauvin would have gotten away with murder had it not been for that video.
We got time off for being
had it not been for the video,
on the job when somebody
we may never even
died
heard
while in
George Floyd,
care.
because the way that police at first covered that incident, it was basically a person who had allegedly committed a crime, resisted arrest, and then had a case of something medically, a medical issue, a medical event that made him expire.
He just died.
A story that's dramatically different from reality. But if it hadn't been for that cell phone,
he expired like a
the jury wouldn't have been dealing with reality. As a matter of fact, there's a good chance there wouldn't have been a jury, good chance there wouldn't have been a trial, good chance we would never know the name George Floyd.
Now the Oprah interview.
Tonight, I know someone who I have a tremendous amount of respect for, who doesn't have to figure out how a black person reacts to this and how a black person talks to her black son. Because she is black, and she has that conversation with her son. I don't know the specifics, but I know that the conversation is there, and she's here. I'm grateful to say, our senior content producer, Jumi Dapo,
sometimes it's just
Sola, thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me on, show.
Tell me what that's like to live in this world, and you lived in the States before you lived in Canada. Tell me what it's like to live on this earth where you have no choice. It's your duty, your responsibility to have that conversation with your son.
Well, it's not what you want to have. It's not a kind of conversation you'd like to have with your kids at an early age, but circumstances and events happening around you just dictate that you have to do it. Otherwise, you probably feel bad or feel guilty, carry the guilt for a long time that you have the chance of educating them, telling them, be hard as it may be, about what the reality is and, about life, about being a black kid in America. You're right, I lived in America for years before moving over to Canada and, having to talk to your kids at a tender age where they're just still supposed to be kids, having fun, not being colors, not being segregated, not being discriminated against, about the fact that this is going to happen to you. And you're looking at their faces while you're telling them those things, and you see the look of surprise. And, when they're old enough to talk, they probably ask you, but why? But, that's a tough question for a parent to answer why it's happening. Because why is it me? Why do I have to endure this? Because it's not. On the other side, I don't think a lot of parents who are not parents of black kids have to really tell the kids quite early in life about the risks out there for them. So it's a burden. It's not what most black parents like to do, but it's just what we have to do. It's more like a duty.
Jumi, on the one hand, a parent always wants their child to grow up with as much confidence as possible. Is that something that goes through your mind when you have that conversation? Yes, I want my son to be safe, but I don't want him to lack confidence.
It's a balance that you have to strike, right? As a parent, you're talking to your kids about the reality out there, but you're also talking to them, and you're having to tell them that, okay, I want you to be as confident as possible. I want you to walk out, hold your head up high, do what you're supposed to do, be you, be happy, let people see who you are, that you're just another kid who's trying to have fun, taking a walk in the park, riding a bike. You enter somewhere, you don't want people to be afraid of you because of the way you look, and which you have no control over. So it's a kind of balance that you're trying to find the middle, if I can use that word, of trying not to make them lose confidence in themselves and begin to see themselves as victims, but also you need to let them know what the real world is about.
Jumi, I wonder if you could just offer us just a couple of specifics. I hate to use this term, safety proofing, but I think everyone understands why I'm using it. What are the specifics that you offer your son to make sure he's as safe as possible in the world that we live in?
So when we look at safety, right, my son is now, when I wrote the letter to him last year, he was 7 years old. My son is now 8 years old. And safety at this stage is not about him being stopped by the police or being harassed, right? That's when he becomes older, maybe a teenager, hanging out with his friends and all of those. At this stage, the kind of things you talk to them about is the fact that, people at school might see them differently, treat them differently, not want to hang out with them, experiences they've had and things like that. And then being able to still, try to get integrated into the society. And then when they're older, right, you're going to drive. Some of the things I already have started planning for is to make sure that I'm probably there. I'm not going to do that for the rest of my life or their life, but be there to kind of shuffle my keys back and forth in a way that I can, as a parent, protect them as much as possible from harassment and things like that. If you're there with them, you probably tell them, okay, this is how to do it, not as a young man. Okay, when you're driving, you need to be cautious because someone could pull you over. If they pull you over, don't argue, just put your hands where they can see you. And it's so interesting that we live in a world where social media has brought all of these things into our homes, on our phones, right? So these kids see those videos, they have questions, and they're beginning to develop, okay, why is this always happening and all of these things? I would just digress a little by telling you that this afternoon, when we heard the verdict, my 10-year-old daughter going on 11, we were watching CNN and we heard one of the anchors on an air say something like, this is justice served. It just came out of her. It was not planned. She says, and this is delicious. I said, what's delicious? She said, the justice, right? It's a delicious meal because this is justice working. So it's just one of those things you have to, tell them about, that as a Black kid, you need to be extra cautious, you need to be extra respectful to the police. It's normal to train your kids to respect authority, but you have to tell them you need to respect authority more. Don't expect the fact that a friend that is not Black is getting away with something. If you do it, you're not going to get away with it. So those are the kind of things you need to kind of talk to them about.
Dr. Jimmy, I've had so many doctors on the air today. I'm calling you a doctor. This makes
not a doctor?
Dr. Jimmy Dapo Ogunsola, thank you so much for talking with us tonight.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
This is Charles Adler tonight.
Hello, I am water.
And I am earth, and we are just made for each other.
I come down as rain and hit on earth.
Together we make mud.
Palm olive.
So all will drive forever in our creation.
Mud.
This is an interesting day for what I'm finding, but it's not the news.
Mix, let us continue thus. We continue to promote the Leticia Pact. We have the Coalition for the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and Persons, and we work with the Regional Commission for the Circular Economy. We
have a low ambition plan because there's a lot of
heritage
power
and
in numbers.
biodiversity.
You get more people to sign on to a low ambition
we call upon all nations to support us in our strategic efforts to protect the tundras and the high mountain ecosystems, as well as all of the people and resources that are housed within them. Colombia invites the world to stand shoulder to shoulder in assuming its historic responsibilities. It must seize the opportunity of change we have before us and take decisive action to achieve the goal of preserving biodiversity.
Have a meeting with all these big clubs in
Jesus Christ.
Was made or exhibited.
Russia's
in the
about to
Grand
nuke
Hall
Washington over
winning fame at home and
Ukraine.
abroad.
And Britain's all about, how dare you start your own league?
师傅大概在17岁左右的时候，第一盆通常菊花也是这一盆金融现状，所以相对来说。
And the retort is, that's why we're starting our own league. We didn't take it seriously that they were really going to start their own league. I can't believe that's the actual story coming out of BBC.
Yeah, difficult to make a decision. They're suffering from decidophobia. You can use this to describe their, well, let's say their
brain fog.
Yes, 各有利弊. 各 carries the meaning of each. 有 would be half. 利 is the pros and 弊 is the cons. 利弊 together pros and cons. So 各有利弊 suggests
all across Canada. From music to history to true crime and more. It's all waiting for you now for free at curiouscast.ca and wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
When your bank account does more, your money does more, so you can live more too. Switch to the Scotiabank Ultimate Package and get a savings rate of up to 1.8%.
Is that these all two big clubs have lost a lot of money because of the pandemic situation, but they have lost money. Doesn't mean that they are in a bankrupt.
This was your opportunity
Barcelona,
to start marketing your
yes,
jerseys
they
and all
are
that
in
crap.
a really serious situation. But Florentino has to make a good balance in a financial situation, even considering the pandemic.
Listen, good to talk to you, Juan. Thank you for your expertise. Juan Castro there, talking to us, a sports journalist, talking to us live from Spain. More on the way. And news that Ed Woodward, who is the executive vice chair of Manchester United, has announced that he will stand down at the end of this year. Could be to do with all of this. You're listening to Newsday, BBC World Service.
Now, let's get some business news. Andrew Wood standing by in Hong Kong. Netflix says the number of subscribers to its streaming service is still rising. You'd have thought everyone who could subscribe had done by now, but no, hundreds of thousands a week. But why have the shares dropped on Wall Street, Andrew?
It's not as high as they
because
wanted,
Netflix is not getting enough subscribers fast.
8 months with 2,500 down. Contact your local Ontario Toyota dealer or visit shoptoyota.ca.
Daughter receiving a note from this
Scallywag?
From this scallywag. Thank you, Devin. Hand over the note, Harriet.
But Daddy!
The note. That's better.
Scoff.
Dear Harriet, whatever you... To our most loyal listeners, and that would be Canadian transport drivers, I want to take the opportunity. For the last few months, I've been talking about how these are essential workers and they ought to be able to get the jab. Well, finally, something is being done about it, but something that I honest to God did not expect.
Because they're essential.
Let me give you the headline here. Globe Mail headline. Manitoba signs deal with North Dakota, which is the neighboring constituency. Manitoba signs deal with North Dakota to vaccinate the province's truckers across the border. So as the story goes, thousands of Manitoba truckers crossing the border into the United States, generally. From Manitoba into North Dakota. There's a border with Minnesota as well, but we just focus on the North Dakota border here. Thousands of Manitoba truckers crossing the border into the U.S. will be able to get vaccinated against COVID-19 in North Dakota. It's because of an agreement hammered out between the provincial government, which is the Brian Pallister government, and the state government in North Dakota. The Manitoba Premier said the arrangement, which he touted as the first of its kind in North America, will ensure that a critical group of workers gets protection against the virus, while the province copes with a persistent vaccine shortage in this country. And Brian Pallister, the Premier of Manitoba, said, quoting, the reality of COVID in Canada today is such that the variants of concern are here. The third wave is here. But the vaccines are not here yet. We have months ahead of us before all Canadians are fully vaccinated. And that's in stark contrast to our American neighbors. Our number one limiting factor in protecting Manitobans from this deadly virus is the availability of COVID-19 vaccines. So that's the Premier of the province, Brian Pallister. These vaccinations for the transport drivers, for Canadian transport drivers, for Manitoba, the vaccinations begin tomorrow at a clinic that's been set up at a rest area along the interstate highway near Drayton, North Dakota, which is just south of the Canada-U.S. line. The vaccines will be free for the truckers and the province. The U.S. government, talk about good neighbors.
AIDS wasn't
enough.
Good news Ebola wasn't enough.
The United States government's covering the cost of vaccines. The state of North Dakota will use funding from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, generally known as FEMA, to pay for the required healthcare staff, such as nurses, to administer the vaccinations. Now, the trucking industry has been pushing for priority access to vaccines, along with other essential workers. We've talked about that several times on this program. I want our loyal listeners, not just because they're loyal listeners, I want all essential workers to be able to get the vaccine as soon as possible.
Sure you do.
So some provinces, such as Ontario and New Brunswick, have included truck drivers in the early stages of the vaccine rollouts, but others, including Manitoba, haven't. So the Premier, Brian Pallister, Premier of Manitoba, says truckers are vital to the province's economy. If you're living in Manitoba or anywhere in this country, you know that. But it's always good to state it. Truckers are vital to the province's economy, moving important goods in and out of the intertwined economies of Manitoba and North Dakota. And when he was asked why truckers weren't already on the list, why truckers weren't already included in Manitoba's own vaccine plans, he said the province was doing its best to manage scarce supply, and they struck the deal with North Dakota to alleviate some of the pressure. The Premier said the province will examine whether similar deals are possible for other essential workers who routinely cross into the United States. Now, the governor of North Dakota, his name is Doug Burgum. Governor Burgum says he has also been in touch with Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe, whose province shares part of the border with North Dakota. He said the more vaccines that can be administered on both sides of the border, the sooner Canada-U.S. travel restrictions can be lifted. He said more than half of the adults in North Dakota, half, have received at least one dose of COVID-19 vaccine, putting the state in a position where they can help Manitoba. The executive director of Manitoba Trucking Association is Terry Shaw. He says the deal will mean truckers in the province will be able to get vaccinated sooner, and it'll make scheduling easier since they'll be able to stop along their routes. He's encouraging other provinces to follow Manitoba's lead. He says, seeing those folks vaccinated not only protects those truck drivers, but it protects the North American supply chain. I absolutely agree.
So you're getting you guys that have one brand on one side for the first dose, and the other brand on the other side for the
United States has an abundance of vaccine.
They're going to get some weird hybrid blood
clot, far more vaccine
triple virus thing
the Americans are demanding right now.
It would be the trucker variant.
Do some deals
virus
to get as much of it into Canada as possible, as much of their surplus. We know that we've got some AstraZeneca, which was surplused by them, because they haven't even approved it for use over there. So we've got well over 1 million doses.
You got countries taking pity on us.
But at the moment,
sending us viral vaccine, whatever.
To put it simply, if peace or shalom is a circle, then justice happens when the circle is broken. What does it take to put the circle back together? But in
it becomes a double
murder
helix
case
where
someone has been brutally executed, you can't give back a life. So what does it take for us to
nor destroyed? I'm not on the
see that
right
Derek Chauvin's act was not a singular controversy?
Season of harvest. I've learned Ikebana from Yoshiko Ishibashi for years. Muzue believes that Ikebana has the power to reflect time.
Is described as a disease or symptoms in Chinese. Again, you recognize the character zheng.
How do we say I have diarrhea? I gotta hear this. I gotta know it's on their website. It's podcast number 1200.
拖延症. Yes, the procrastination.
Oh, right,
that's the disease.
I need to know the Cyrillic word for toilet.
But for me, if I am making a decision about a very important issue in my life, I can be very indecisive. But for things about where to go, where to have lunch, where to have fun with my friends, I can be the one who makes the decision. So it depends.
Yeah, I agree.
And here we have a list of symptoms of decidophobia. Let's check whether or not you click the boxes. First one is anxiety. Do you feel anxious before making decisions?
Again, it depends on which ones they are. Day-to-day operations, not really.
This is helpful for learning languages.
Was played by Jeff Chandler. Mr. Conklin by Gail Gordon. Others in tonight's cast were Jane Morgan, Dick Brenna, Gloria McMillan, Tommy Cook, Sandra Gould, Bobby Ellis, and Jeff Silver. Dentists know what cleans teeth best, and over 4,000 dentists say Colgate tooth powder with a 2-minute routine gets teeth sparkling and
like no other. It's driving season. Please finance a Volvo XC40 T5 from 2.9%.
lightning surfaces. Always brush away from the gums. See how quickly this gets teeth naturally bright. It removes dull film that improper brushing misses. And Colgate tooth powder also sweetens your breath. Try it. Buy Colgate tooth powder today.
Businesses a list of candidates who join.
In the 80s and 90s, I think we got exposed to every public health type ad you could imagine. In between the cartoons, kids shows, everything. There was stay away from power lines and hydroelectric facilities. And no, I'm not even joking. Don't jump out from between cars, and don't stick your hands in the machinery.
Fashion new looks using pre-finished siding. Create more enjoyable spaces with our vast selection of decking and railing. Monaghan Lumber, king of the woods, your exterior.
Don't pet strange dogs. Don't drink cleaning products. Essentially, they didn't say that. They described it to us as kids, so we wouldn't do something stupid and end up drinking cleaning products.
As our listeners know, we have loved bringing under.
Don't start fires in your house.
Clients trust our expertise and the importance of gold and silver ownership, not a paper.
Don't smoke cigarettes.
For safety and security. Find out more by listening every Saturday at 1 p.m. and Sunday mornings at 10, or call 1-877-8-allwealth.com.
For the money guy, or whatever.
This is Global News. I'm Toby Kerr. A jury has convicted former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin of murder and manslaughter in the death of George Floyd. That's the sound outside the courthouse in Minneapolis after the verdict was read. Members of George Floyd's family also expressing joy over the verdict. Floyd's nephew, Brandon Williams, says the family is relieved.
Words can't explain how we're feeling right now. You know, justice has been served, you know. I'm saying? This peace for everybody around the nation, around the United States, not just for us, you know, who made history with this.
Floyd.
And could face up to 40 years in prison. Worldwide protests against racial injustice erupted after Chauvin was filmed kneeling on Mr. Floyd's neck for more than 9 minutes.
Yes, Chauvin faces decades in prison when he's sentenced in 8 weeks.
Floyd case. Body camera footage released by Columbus police appears to show the 16-year-old swinging a knife at another girl before being shot 4 times. All 6 English Premier League football teams in
or 240 from 55. Ontario, Alberta, Manitoba, BC have already announced that change. Quebec announcing Tuesday it's dropping the age to 45. All provinces had previously been limiting the vaccine to those over 55 as health experts looked into the risk the vaccine posed for extremely rare blood clots. Debate on Monday's federal budget, the first in 2 years, has begun in the House of Commons with a vote to take place later this week. But even as opposition leaders criticize the fiscal blueprint, it appears to be safe from a confidence vote. Federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says 2 signature promises, universal child care and a $15 federal minimum wage, align well with the New Democrats' election platform. The minority Liberals need the support of at least one major party to survive a confidence vote. From the Global News Desk, I'm Toby Kerr.
Lawrence and Claire. On the way, more of the implications of the trial of Derek Chauvin, convicted for the murder of George Floyd.
They wouldn't play like the full song.
Also, we'll be looking at the death of Chad's leader, Idris Deby, for so long a crucial figure in the Sahel, and also the Africa Daily podcast asks why there's been a sharp rise in teenage pregnancies across sub-Saharan Africa during the coronavirus pandemic. Also,
you told everybody to stay inside.
The small matter of what was going to be a Super League, not so super now. So what happens there coming up?
Unintended consequences.
You're a scientist. That's why I've gotten you here. Is it as scary to you as it is to a layperson like me?
Yeah, it's a tough question to answer because of the fact that we don't have a lot of care. When we look at mutations that come up, we can now kind of look at the blueprint of the SARS coronavirus 2 genome and say, okay, if we see mutations in this region or this region,
you said that self-repairing telomeres. That means it'll always go back to the plan that worked, the last plan that worked. That's like self-backup software. That's crazy.
There are some concerns.
It'll never get old and die.
The problem is that nature is complex. So we then have to look at that and say, okay, does that actually, can that be validated in regards to our own characterization of the virus? So if we look at infections, do we actually see a difference between the circulating strains? And that's the part that I don't think we necessarily have clarity on yet. The signs are pointing there, but we certainly need to be sure that this is actually true. And if it's not, then we have to figure out what else is going on.
So, Dr. Kendrick, I don't want to pretend to be a virus detective, but I've got to say this. India's had the coronavirus certainly as long as we've had it, and it only got bad in recent weeks. Is there no connection between mutations and death?
Well, there's certainly a few things going on, right? So B117 is currently circulating, 1351 and P1 to a much lesser extent, and of course, obviously, this new variant. Then you take into account certainly the loosening of restrictions over the last few weeks. So, where we get kind of into the weeds a little bit is trying to say, is this because of the other factors that are going on, and we're just seeing basically, the loosening restrictions that are driving this, or is this truly something that's different about the virus itself and this new variant? And that's a game where I think we're trying to figure out as quickly as possible what this means. I think that certainly we want to be very cautious and certainly try and get this rectified as quickly as possible. But we're in a tough situation. I mean, we're all reading the reports coming out moment by moment, and it is certainly very disheartening to see what is going on.
When you see entire towns just ransacked, populations disappearing, and as I say, it's been like this for the last few weeks now in India. As a microbiologist, what are the questions Dr. Jason Kendrick's asking?
Fucking cholera.
The question to me, first and foremost, is how do we get out of this for those people? Certainly we know that this hits areas that are low and middle income or lower socioeconomic status disproportionately. So what do we do to try and
with more money just can buy their own medicine without anybody finding out they're sick?
How do we stop this from happening again? And that to me has been one of the things that we've looked at with COVID is certainly we will get through this in North America probably within the next few months with the vaccination program. But we've got to think about these other regions of the world where they are extremely resource strapped, and how do we support efforts to get them through this as quickly as possible? And they're looking for things like oxygen, in terms of supplies. I mean, these are the most basic of medical supplies that they need right now.
Saw that earlier today, and I said to myself, my God, talking about one of the largest populations in the world, they're out of oxygen. I mean, we've got to do an international airlift. I mean, that's what comes to mind. But I still have no idea how easy or difficult that is. I have no idea whether the WHO even thinks about these things. Is this something that you have thought about, that some countries might actually run out of oxygen?
Certainly we've heard of this, right? Even certainly in California and areas in the U.S. When they were going through kind of the peak of their second wave, we heard of hospitals that were in this kind of a crisis situation. Certainly Brazil, we've heard of definitely the loss of sedatives and drugs. So a lot of people being intubated while they're conscious, just horrible things that have to be done to save lives. The question is, where do you get these supplies from, and who can provide them? We only have a couple of nations that are really doing well with the pandemic in regards to vaccinations, and that being primarily the UK and Israel, with their kind of move back into reopenings. It's tough because I think they're also looking at this and saying we don't necessarily know what is going to happen as we go through these reopenings. So, if you want to get supplies out, and you also want to ensure that you have supplies on hand if things start to go south in your own region. It's tough. This is why I think public health people have the worst job and the best job in the world. Is they get to save people when they have the chance, but they have to make these decisions at the worst of times.
So, Dr. Kendrick, speaking of supplies, we need to say that we did better in the country today with the numbers of vaccinations that we have done recently, but a lot of that is because the government loosened the regulations about younger people, meaning people over 40, getting AstraZeneca, but there it is. AstraZeneca is being manufactured in India with all of the cases they've got over there.
You're going to get the first dose.
There's just no way that the suspension isn't going to take place for a while. So we're not expected to get fresh batches of AstraZeneca because they're much needed there. Do you have some thoughts about that?
What if all they have is the Johnson & Johnson?
I think that, this is one of the eventualities that we are always concerned about. Certainly, we've heard an increase in supply for Pfizer, which is going to be good, which will help offset some of that. I'm hoping that with the relaxation on some of the age brackets for AstraZeneca now, that we at least will get an additional area of the population vaccinated within Canada. So hopefully that will let us get transmission, under better control than what it has been. But certainly it brings up some questions for the rest of the year. What is this going to look like, and how extended of a forecast do we now have for vaccinations? I think it's a moving target, and I don't think we necessarily have time to think about that right now. It's really how do we get the crisis somewhat under control in India as quickly as possible, because it will have long-term ramifications if we don't.
Dr. Kindrich, would we be naive if we thought we could avoid having that same virus that's killing as many Indians as it's killing every single day over there? Would we be naive to think that we're not going to get the same virus here?
I think we would like to be hopeful, but certainly I think there is naivety in that. The UK has announced, I think, just over 70 cases now. I think that we're doing more genomic surveillance, which will help identify any of this variant as quickly as possible. But certainly it is one of those eventualities, and I think again it comes back to the fact that if we can identify it quick enough, we will be in a good position. But I think we also need to remain hopeful that this variant maybe does not have the properties that we're so concerned that it does.
So the planes are still coming into Canada at various airports, including Pearson in Toronto, including YVR in Vancouver, including the airport.
All these British people.
Can you explain to me why the federal government, I mean, you're in touch with the government, you're a microbiologist, every scientist is in touch with government for various reasons.
Yeah,
can you tell me why the government is so confident that their security measures are so stringent, based on everything you know, so stringent that we can just keep bringing planes in from places like Brazil, but India especially
this
right
is a man
now,
with the confidence to do blackface.
Air traffic from India to Canada than there ever would be from Brazil to Canada because of our population. And maybe the people, of course, who are coming in are Canadian citizens. I'll stipulate all of that. But can you be as confident as the government appears to be that whatever's going on in India is not coming here via airplane?
If I was that confident that I wouldn't have called or at least recommended, trying to be more stringent on international travel during the early part of 2021 when we were concerned about B117, and the other two variants coming into Canada. There were quite a few of us that went forward and said we need to be very concerned about this and certainly need to be considering restricting international travel into Canada. So I think that I like to be optimistic at the best of times. I'm concerned because of the fact that we weren't able to already do this when we knew that these three variants were moving through populations. Now we see a massive outbreak with a variant that we don't know much about. How easily are we going to be able to track that in time? And obviously with the variants that we have in Canada, we've seen how quickly they spread. So again, it's going to be very, very difficult to try and keep this out. I think our best hope right now is if they're not going to restrict travel, then we better hope that our surveillance efforts are as top notch and running as smoothly as possible.
From Saskatchewan, microbiologist Dr. Jason Kindrich. The show's content producer is Jumi Dapo Ogunsola, and our technical producer is Ryan Weehall. Now, our executive producer is Lady Catherine Stewart. I'll be off tomorrow night. Richard Kluche will be hosting. My name is Charles Adler. Thank you so much for joining us. Right here in a moment, Shane Hewitt to tell us what's coming up next hour. This is Charles Adler Tonight.
No, good.
Attention, passengers.
Microbiologists and virologists.
Looks like we have a full cabin today.
Really, Dad?
We're expecting a pretty smooth trip. Our crew will be handing out snacks shortly. Stand by.
Dad, stop.
Often. Well, who was it that pulled this mean trick on you?
No. Month ago, I wouldn't have figured her to live through the winter. Well, I even thought she might leave me something in her will, too, but I... Well, doggone it, she was jumping around out there this morning as chipper as a young filly.
Ah, she's a young mother now.
Well, that's no joke, man. That's exactly what it is. That boy of hers has been home 3 weeks now, and it's made a new woman out of her.
Yeah.
Korean and Czech diplomats as well. Is there a feeling that this is Putin's drive to a more isolated position, that there's a different kind of Iron Curtain coming down again here?
Well, some people are afraid of the Iron Curtain. As you might have heard, that 500,000 Russians were not able to travel to Turkey soon after the Turkish leader said he was not recognizing Crimean annexation. So people had to decide whether to just stay in Russia and wait, postpone vacations until Turkey opens up. And only 13% of 500,000 people decided to spend their vacations in Russia. So in other words, Russians want out, Russians want to travel, but nobody understands what to make of it. We hear the news about Russian diplomats being expelled, or we hear the news about the Czech beer might be banned in Russia. That's a big thing for many people who like Czech beer.
Well, listen, it's good to talk to you. More on this coming up on Newsday. Anna Nemtsov, thank you for now. Moscow correspondent for the Daily Beast.
Quick reminder, the top story, the conviction of the murder of George Floyd, the former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin. The protests, of course, are seen around the world. On the program, we are talking about, well, what civil rights readers are calling a historic moment. We're looking at the legal repercussions, but also people who knew George Floyd as well.
An awful lot of news around today, and the other big news is in sport. The European Super League could be teetering on the brink of collapse before it even got off the ground. James Gregg is back.
Well, it was a whirlwind 48 hours, Claire, wasn't it?
It's also measured in terms of harvest loss, drought, floods, and is measured in human tragedy. I won't talk here about the health consequences of this situation. Emerging illnesses are often, of course, the result of the fact that human beings have trampled on natural ecosystems. Everywhere across the globe, threats to biodiversity are some of the main perils that humankind will have to face in the decades to come. And yet, we only note very scant progress thus far, at a time when we're closing the decade that the United Nations has devoted to this matter. It is for this reason that we need to increase our efforts on all fronts. I wish to particularly touch upon marine biodiversity. This is one of the subjects that I believe is a priority, and which is so rarely understood.
I can't listen.
You know what? That was really good, but I just need you to try one a little lower.
Okay. HSBC is offering a low mortgage rate. It's one of
lower.
It's one of Canada's lowest mortgage rates.
Even lower.
Civil rights leaders.
It crumbled like a deck of cards, like you said before it even started.
Here's one for you, Drew. The United legend Eric Cantona talking about
credit approval. Visit hsbc.ca/firsthome for details.
The Building Union of Canada reminds you that the National Day of Mourning commemorates workers who have been killed or injured due to workplace-related hazards and incidents. They are also a daily reminder of the importance of ongoing good health and safety conditions. All workers deserve a safe place to work. On Wednesday, April 28th, let's pause to remember those lost or hurt on the job and commit to a safer workplace. A reminder from the Building Union of Canada. Visit them at thebuck.ca.
What does Andrea's CRV have in common with Pat's Civic? The answer, both were assembled right here in Ontario. And during the Honda Checkered Flag event, lease your own Ontario-built 2021 Civic LX from $62 weekly at 0.99% and 0 down, including a $750 Honda bonus. Ontario is something we can all be proud to be a part of and support. Includes freight and fees for 60 months, taxes extra OAC, made with domestic and imported parts, by appointment only. See HondaOntario.com.
I mean imported parts.
But yeah, I think there has to be a complete change in maybe the ownership of the club, or giving back to the fans, or giving the fans.
Charles Adler tonight. Once again, here is Charles Adler.
In Britain, this is Wednesday, April 21st, the 95th anniversary of the birth of Queen Elizabeth II. So let's wish our Queen
95.
a happy birthday. Shane Hewitt, raise your glass. Will you please raise your, whatever glass you have, it doesn't matter to me what's in the glass. Just raise your glass. Coffee. Just coffee. Okay, and I'll raise mine to the Queen.
To the Queen. I drank too soon. I thought I had premature cheersing elation there. Sorry.
You guys can all go back across the ocean. Eh?
You've got a professional comedian on tonight, is that right?
Yeah.
Damn, what the fuck?
Well, we do.
I mean, obviously, he said that there was talk of him leaving in any way, but I do think that this brought in a lot of pressure.
Guyana, on behalf of the group of 77,
Guyana
China.
Again?
Mr. President,
they're playing the same
gives me great honor
That's what they're doing.
to participate in this summit this year that marks the super year for biodiversity and nature.
We'll come back in an
The
hour.
year has provided us with a unique opportunity to get back on track.
Goes by, and he's going to be on the shift, and he's funny. I like him. He's very direct. Like it's very no kidding around. Like he calls it for what it is.
Sick and tired of COVID. Must be the only one.
Yeah, it seems like he's all alone on an island on that one.
Oh yeah, like I can't imagine that relating to too many people, Shane.
God, I'm so sick and tired of it.
Can you imagine what life will be like? And I asked Darren Markland earlier, just up the road from you in Edmonton, and I asked him. I said, "Are we still going to be talking about COVID like down the road, down the road, down the road?" He says, "Yep." He thinks this is with us for the rest of our lives. Now, it may not be as bad as it is right now in terms of the numbers and all of that, but the idea that this virus will just kind of get tired or bored and blow dodge, not happening.
Yeah, and I just had that same conversation today too, but not about Canada, just about some other countries and watching news in other countries. I invite us as Canadians to maybe pop into a broadcast from a news broadcast from a different, even continent if you somehow can, and try to see what that looks like, because now American news is so heavily politicized. Like there's always that political agenda and lean behind it. It's hard to find a good channel that just does news anymore. But that being said,
Al Jazeera.
It really is. It's so far down on the list. It's like a little side note of, this is how many cases today. Go get your vaccines here. Let's talk about something else. Now, over the last couple of weeks, of course, they've had other topics that are very important to talk about too. But just look at other countries and see what they're talking about. It does make me curious to see if I believe that it's going to be a part of our conversation for a long time. The question is how much, right?
India, nearly 300,000 cases a day. More than 2,000 people dying every single day. And the furnaces for the crematoriums running 24/7 in many Indian towns and cities. Can you imagine what it must be like to be living in that country right now?
I can't, and I mean, we complain about the communication from our government. I'm only guessing, but I'm guessing communication for some of those communities that are real tent city slum cities, that they don't even get to find out what's going on.
No. By the way, they're doing no lockdowns at all.
Oh, really?
At the moment, their government doesn't believe in it. So we have no idea how much spread there will be. We do keep hearing about this double mutant that none of us have any information on, or none of us have enough information on. And of course, the fear is, as we know what a pandemic is, it's worldwide, that whatever they have there, this double mutant, because India has had coronavirus for quite a while, but it's only in the last few weeks that it's accelerated like this. And of course, the thinking is, well, if they have something there, there's a good chance it's coming here, especially because we've got planes coming in every few hours to various Canadian airports every single day from India. The Prime Minister said today that there was nothing to worry about because our security precautions are the best. But I mean, let's face it, that's like any other political statement. It means absolutely nothing.
Yeah, well, I know people that have literally walked out of the airport.
Yeah, I mean, everyone does. I mean, the only people who believe that the people are immediately tested and immediately quarantined and it's guaranteed, the only people who believe that are people who either, I guess, just believe press releases or are out of touch with media or simply don't know or are ideologically predisposed to just believing whatever they hear from a government authority. But it's fairly easy to land in this country, no matter where you're coming from, and simply walk away. Sometimes you get a ticket. But the idea that you're immediately tested and quarantined, for sure, 100%. Well, first of all, if that was the case, we wouldn't have any variants in our system in the first place. The variants came from somewhere. They didn't come from Lethbridge.
Right. No offense, Lethbridge. And I know people that have come across, they've said that, they travel for business and they go home and they quarantine. These are not people that are, flouting the rules, but that they said that sometimes they come across, they go through the thing and there's nobody even there to talk to them or tell them. And there's that. And then, of course, the taxi business out of places like Buffalo is booming. People fly to Buffalo and then you take a taxi and the taxi drives you right home, like across the border. So people are avoiding those hotels and they're literally walking away from them. The first thing the government will tell you, though, is to pass over the credit card to pay for it all. So, such is politics.
So outside of the very direct guy who writes ads and has an interesting name and wants to tell people that he's COVIDed out, what else have you got in 40 seconds or less?
Going to talk about the Sasquatch attacking people down in, I think it's California. We're going to talk about aliens.
That's a documentary about the Sasquatch and the cannabis farmers.
Yeah, we've got the Woo coming on with Dave Scott. Plus, we're going international to Tokyo to Chris Gilbert, and we are going to do the Are You OKs and all the other pieces that we always do coming up on the shift. Oh, it's good news.
I just got loaned another 30 seconds by our tremendous technical producer Ryan Lee.
Oh, that's nice. Well, Good News Tuesday as well is coming up too. So we're going to
celebrate. Did you feel that I dragooned you into saying happy birthday to the Queen? Was that something you really didn't want to do?
No, I think it's great. I think we should sell. I mean, the relevance of it all today, it's sure great discussion.
Right. So there's no boundaries here. I haven't crossed any boundaries. I had no need for an apology or anything like that.
No, sir. I drank all my coffee. You could apologize for that. That's about it.
And with no chocolate bars. This guy.
He went into hiding, but we rescued the girl and brought her back home. Of course, she was already pregnant. She was pregnant, 2 months pregnant.
Do these men get arrested and prosecuted?
That is what it's supposed to be, but corruption gets in the way. Some people get to buy their way out. Some parents tend to even side with the perpetrators and they pick some little money from them just to cancel the case and then close the file. So even when the police people know that this is wrong, this person is supposed to be arrested, sometimes parents make that difficult because they want to negotiate things out of court, out of police, out of the law. And of course, they don't involve the girl who is the victim here.
Remember, only Chesterfield is made the modern way with Accuray. This amazing quality detective electronically checks and controls the making of your Chesterfield.
Bullshit.
giving a uniformity and smoking quality never possible before.
There would be a programmable.
For the first time, you get a perfect smoke column from end to end.
Chip for that come from
China. From the first puff to the last puff.
Saturday morning at 11. And for answers anytime, call 1-855-55-DR-LOU or pinpointhealth.ca.
If you're driving less these days, I've got good news and bad news. Good news, you're saving on gas. Bad news, a vehicle that sits made to go off issues. Good news, the all-in spring event has you covered. Receive a free seasonal tire changeover and brake inspection with the purchase of fees.
We can't eat in restaurants anymore. Find one that has a payphone that doesn't exist anymore. Call that motherfucker. Hungover from like a golden griddle. That is
Made the difference between a restless week and a good night's sleep.
Keisha gave peace a chance with a loan from Brokers Lamina at 1-800-NEW-CREDIT. It's easy and hassle-free to apply over the phone or online at lamina.ca. Get approved instantly up to...
How much?
This is at 1-800-NEW-CREDIT or apply online at lamina.ca.
Time someone's crashed into that statue, it's a public safety issue.
I'm gonna get this town on my side. Yes, there's something happening in that town. So much drama. Rutherford Falls, new series Thursday, April 29th on Showcase. Also available on Stack TV.
We believe in a greater Toronto. This is CFMJ Global News Radio 640 Toronto.
News, I'm Toby Kerr. Former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin has been convicted of murder and manslaughter in the death of George Floyd. Reporter Aaron Katarski says the judge returned their verdict after 10 hours of jury deliberation.
One by one, Judge Peter Cahill read the counts and affirmed the jury's verdict of guilty on charges of second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. Derek Chauvin, in a light gray jacket, white shirt, and blue tie, had on a light blue mask, so his face was indiscernible. There was no apparent reaction from the former Minneapolis police officer as the jury's guilty verdicts were read.
Chauvin faces decades in prison when he's sentenced in 8 weeks. Meantime, U.S. President Joe Biden is praising the conviction, calling it a turning point for the country.
This is a time for this country to come together, to unite as Americans. There can never be any safe harbor for hate in America.
The case put a spotlight on racism and policing in the U.S. and triggered weeks of protests across America and around the world. Canada is looking to expand international travel restrictions as provinces also move to curb domestic travel. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announcing that the use of quarantine hotels for air travelers will continue for at least another month. He says the government is also weighing further options to restrict travel from hotspot countries, citing India specifically. Meanwhile, Ontario will begin turning away non-essential travelers who arrive at checkpoints along the Manitoba and Quebec borders. And BC is looking at roadblocks at ferry terminals or highways in and out of Vancouver. Small business owners and advocates say Ottawa should rethink the eligibility requirements for business subsidies after Monday's federal budget failed to include companies launched shortly before or after the COVID-19 pandemic. Canadian Federation of Independent Business President Dan Kelly says these companies haven't been open long enough to qualify, but they're still hurting.
It's life or death because, you know, the business owner, when you're first getting going, you have no reserves left. You've borrowed every nickel you possibly can to get your business running. You've invested your entire life savings. So you can't pivot and then just say, well, I'm just going to abandon ship.
Kelly has warned that more than 181,000 small businesses are at risk of closing over the next year because of the pandemic. A Superior Court judge has ruled that Quebec's secularism law is largely legal, but Justice Marc-André Blanchard acknowledged the controversial Bill 21 violates the rights of Muslim women and has cruel and dehumanizing consequences for those who wear religious symbols. The law prohibits public sector employees who are deemed to be in positions of authority from wearing symbols such as hijabs, kippas, or turbans at work. Many commercial truckers in Manitoba will soon be able to get COVID-19 vaccines in North Dakota. The province and state have signed an agreement to provide vaccines for cross-border truckers. Manitoba Premier Brian Pallister says he hopes to expand the program to other essential workers who cross the border.
The fact of the matter is that the United States has more vaccines, and so we're looking.
Last week, there were tit-for-tat diplomatic expulsions, and Western governments have expressed concern at the build-up of Russian troops near Ukraine's border and in annexed Crimea. There's concern, too, over the health of jailed Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny, who's on hunger strike.
Steve Rosenberg reporting. You're listening to World News from the BBC. The breakaway European Super League football competition says it's considering appropriate steps forward following the withdrawal of all 6 English Premier League clubs pledged to join. It said any decisions to reshape would take account of...
So it doesn't exist.
Rangers 6-1. On the diamond, the Blue Jays fall 4-2 to the Boston Red Sox. From the Global News Desk, I'm Toby Carr.
Oh my God. Oh crap.
So it just cease to exist.
Change on Thursday. The Chinese Foreign Ministry said Mr. Xi would deliver a speech through a video link days after representatives from both countries met in Shanghai and agreed to cooperate on climate issues. Neighbouring African leaders have expressed shock and dismay at the death of Chad's president Idriss Déby, shot as he confronted advancing Islamist rebels. Mali's interim president called it a heavy loss for the Sahel region's fight against jihadists. Mr. Déby had only just won a 6th term in office. The army says his son, Mohamed Idriss Déby Kaka, is taking over as interim president until elections next year. The American pop music composer and producer Jim Steinman has died at the age of 70.
For sure. And if you have ever seen a TV commercial, he's probably popped up in the TV commercials. He's a comedian, he's a creator, he's a musician, and he's also a dad. His name is Stuart Reynolds, and he is going to join us on the show. He did put together a piece that was, I'm sick and tired of COVID, among many others that have gone viral. His YouTube channel has thousands and thousands of followers too, and like 250,000 followers on Facebook. So great stuff. He's Canadian, and I look forward to chatting with him on the shift tonight. I look forward to chatting with a couple of our close friends and family members here on the shift, which includes Sir Christopher Gilbert, and we're going to go all the way across the Pacific Pond to Tokyo and talk to Chris. And we also are going to step into the world of the woo tonight. It seems like a good opportunity to introduce Ryan O'Donnell, who is here with us on the shift as always, content producer. Now, are we really talking about Sasquatches and marijuana farmers?
Actually, I think that's maybe a part of the conversation. The number one draw tonight is the fact that from the time we last had Dave Scott on the show, there have been some pretty insanely cool UFO videos, like making me even think about it kind of videos released by the Pentagon and the U.S. Navy that are pretty jarring stuff. So Dave is obviously, the words he used in the email to describe how excited he was, I can't repeat, but Dave is very excited to talk about the
the world of the woo. We're going to get into that with Dave Scott and Spaced Out Radio on the shift. Brendan Kelly is also here as well. How'd you sleep last night, Brendan? Yeah, I've been sleeping.
No, but well, this morning, I slept better than I have been. I don't think it was perfect, but I mean, perfection is an unattainable goal.
You're putting droplets all over the mic.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfectly imperfect.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds to me like a good opportunity to kick off the most important of all the segments here on a Tuesday night on the shift / Wednesday morning. So we don't call it Good News Tuesday. We do call it Good.
And they tell me the service is marvelous. Oh, it is, although I think they overdo it a little bit.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, I didn't mind when the conductor sent me gardenias. But when the porter tucked me in my berth and sang Rockabye Baby, I thought that was going too far. Yeah? And the candy vendor, was he ritzy?
He was ritzy, huh?
Yeah, you should have heard him. He walked up and down the aisle yelling candy, peanuts, popcorn, and annuities.
It's up to you. Whatever you think is good news for us. It doesn't matter how big or how small. Good news is good news, and we will get started for you so you can see what it's like. Your calls, if you want to tell us the story, 877-399-9898. That same number for the text messages as well. You know what? What's good news, I think, for me, is I went outside today, and sometimes good news is just that simple.
You're gonna fucking die.
I did. I went outside. I went downtown because I had to pick up something that I had purchased, and one of those buy it online, pick it up in the store kind of curbside scenario.
You got scammed.
And scenarios. And while I was downtown, I did take the time to go for a socially distanced walk with a friend. And that was
airborne AIDS.
Amazing.
The
sun was shining. It was a beautiful day downtown Calgary. It was quite alive. I was surprised.
Airborne
There's
AIDS.
meaningful police reform legislation in his name.
Fuck's sakes.
Gorilla.
Don't worry, Jack. I made up my mind to behave myself. I'm a changed guy.
Well, that suits me, Abe. I'm glad to hear it. Believe me.
To show you my heart's in the right place, I brought you a bouquet of flowers.
Flowers?
Hey, wait a minute, Jack. Drop that bouquet.
Why, what's wrong?
I saw Abe put a tarantula in that.
A tarantula?
Yeah.
Why, those things are deadly. Abe Lyman, that's positively the worst thing I've ever heard of.
Well, gee, I only did it for a laugh.
A laugh? What a sense of humor. You're the kind of a guy who would give your grandmother a hot foot.
I do, and she loves it.
You and your practical jokes. Say, Harry, you know what Lyman did to me last summer in Hollywood?
What?
I was nice enough to invite him to my house for the weekend, and he put a shark in my swimming pool.
He did?
Yeah, I thought it was a rubber one until I started missing toes. How do you like that for a trick?
That was one of my best gags.
Yeah. Well, look, Abe, just attend to your music tonight and keep away from me, will you? Come in. Oh, how do you do?
Greetings, Mr. Benny.
No, it's not Rochester.
What do you make of what President Biden and Vice President?
Yeah, and here's the thing: way better job this time. The sheets are nice and tight because the metal pushes it all together. It's like sleeping in a hotel bed. So I'm really looking forward to climbing in that tonight. Yeah, it only still 33 minutes, but baby steps.
33 minutes, no, you're bad.
It's painful, right?
Yeah, and this is the scope of good news. Whatever good news is for you, Brendan got a little sleep. Ryan can't wait to go sleep. And here are some of your text messages before we get into the headlines, because I want to give you one or two, and then we'll get back to it. 877-399-9898. Dwayne says, good news. Had a great supper. Pan-fried coated chicken, homemade potato wedges, and salad. See, good news comes in all forms. Absolutely. Here's another one from Jasper. My good news that I went on a 3-hour walk all over New Westminster and enjoyed the sun, fresh air, and spring flowers. So what is your good news? Doesn't matter what it is. It can be anything.
My name's Jasper from Jasper.
Suggest, and even not to suggest, but really state that some people are better than other people, and we have to undo those laws. We have to undo those systems, and we have an opportunity to do that right now, certainly starting at our nation's capital. It starts by rewriting our justice systems. We can't just continue to tinker with our policing systems. We have to completely redesign the ways that we protect our communities, because clearly the current systems are not working for all of us. How do you feel then today? Is the world changed for you following this guilty verdict? Do you feel more optimistic?
I do feel more optimistic. I think certainly being able to tell my young Black children that the officer who was bold and brazen enough to not only take the life of another man, but to do so callously with his hands in his pockets while watching it being filmed, that he trusted the system to work in his behalf. I feel like I have confidence in being able to tell my children that he was wrong, that the system did not work in his behalf, that he was not protected by that system today, that a Black man's life was not protected on that day, but it was honored on today by sending that man to jail. I feel hope in that, and I hope that my Black and brown sisters and brothers feel hope in that hopefully another man will not have to suffer the same consequences that George Floyd Jr. suffered, because the next Derek Chauvin will recognize that he does not have the power
on standby in many cities, fearing the potential for violence. But tonight, all of that is off the table, and instead the focus is on the actions of a single police officer who has now been found guilty of murdering George Floyd. By the end of that court session, when the verdict was read out, Derek Chauvin was being led away in handcuffs to await sentencing.
Jackson, the sentencing didn't happen today. Do we know when it will happen and what the ranges are that Chauvin could face?
Sentencing will likely take place in about 8 weeks' time. The maximum sentence he could face for that second-degree murder charge is 40 years in prison. The third-degree murder charge carries 25 years as a maximum, and manslaughter carries 10 years as a maximum. But of course, Donna, the question is, how will he be sentenced exactly given those 3 convictions and given the fact that he is a first-time offender?
And Jackson, George Floyd's face is now known around the world as a symbol of oppression and police brutality. I guess the question is, will this conviction today lead to real meaningful change in America?
That's the big unknown out of all this. And I think the big concern in a lot of communities in this country is that this will all be for nothing. We heard the Attorney General in Minnesota today say that today is not justice, but it is the start of accountability. And a short time ago, Vice President Kamala Harris and President Joe Biden addressed the nation about using this as a step forward.
Nothing can ever bring their brother, their father back.
Hey, you don't know Micmac.
Of this so-called Super League competition, the question now is, what is going to happen with this match?
A piece of police reform legislation named for George Floyd. It would do things like track problematic officers, track use of force, and mandate better training to address issues of racial bias, both overt and perhaps subtle racial bias, and how those things impact policing in this country.
So that's the story, and some of your text messages about good news reflect this. Good News Tuesday, Nira in Orangeville says the verdict. So the verdict itself being good news, the fact that we're here having the verdict, definitely not good news. I mean, that doesn't bring back George Floyd, right? Thank you, Nira, for your sharing your heart on the text. Catherine also says, finally, the officer in the USA made responsible.
Hi, Toots. Nice boy. And Jack, this is my piano player, Machine Gun Stokowski.
My, what name? Say, who's that new saxophone player over there?
You mean Butch?
Yes, yes. I noticed he was scribbling on a piece of paper all during the last number. What was that for?
Well, every month he has to write a letter to the parole board.
Well, that's sweet of him to remember. Harry, that's a nice bunch of boys Abe has here.
Yes, they are, Jack. They all came in cab, which they drove. By the way, Jack, since I'm taking Don Wilson's place here, is it all right if I say my little piece now?
Oh, sure, Harry. I've been sort of waiting for that. Go right ahead.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you're looking for an economical dessert, be sure and go
to Arabia. On April 20th, 2020, West Texas Intermediate closed at nearly negative $38.
There was no playbook on it. And so managers and business leaders were like, well, geez, I better start figuring this out.
Of course, it wasn't just the industry scrambling behind the scenes.
This strikes right at the heart of the entire Canadian economy.
The UCP government was watching its budget assumptions go up in flames. The price collapse added billions of dollars to the deficit, and companies were halting production, putting thousands of jobs at risk.
It's unlikely in the next while we're going to see such a wild ride.
Richard Masson says a lot of lessons were learned that day. While the price went back about par the next day, it took months for it to fully recover. Worldwide demand is coming back and supply is being taken off the market. Today, oil is trading back above $60 US per barrel.
OPEC Plus, they realize that they need to work together to manage the market, that it's in their interest to do so. You know what?
You sound exactly like a serial
O'Dwyer says the industry is very different than it was 1 year ago.
Instead of continuing spending, reinvesting in the company, building more capacity, drilling more wells to create more production opportunities, people are living living within a budget now.
Just in case what was once thought impossible were to happen again.
It happened once, Tom. So Why won't it happen again?
Tom Vernon, Global News.
I signed up today to get on the waiting list for the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, and I can't get an appointment because there was no appointments to be had. But I did it. I signed up. The national, and this article came out, and I was like, oh no, now what? The National Advisory Committee on Immunization, NACI, has postponed unveiling new guidance on Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, which has been linked to extremely rare cases of blood clots. Michael Couture looks at what may have delayed the announcement.
Lines were long at Ontario pharmacies after the province lowered the eligibility age for the AstraZeneca vaccine to 40. It means Prime Minister Justin Trudeau can get his shot too.
My office and I are busy trying to book appointments, and we will be sure to invite everyone along to help encourage others to get vaccinated.
Quebec also lowered its age of eligibility to 45. The National Advisory Committee on Immunization was supposed to brief reporters on possible new guidelines, but 5 minutes before the news conference, the briefing was abruptly cancelled. In a statement, a spokesperson from the Public Health Agency of Canada said NACI has postponed the planned release of its guidance on the AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine in order to further validate its data analysis.
This has been certainly a tumultuous time in regards to what the recommendations are for the AstraZeneca vaccine.
Virologist Jason Kinderchuk says the variants of concern are wreaking havoc, likely forcing NACI to adjust its guidance.
Where can we actually adopt some additional vaccination within age groups that's going to provide protection without any added risk?
That was it.
Now, Health Canada has approved the AstraZeneca vaccine for all adults, but NACI's job is to make national recommendations. Provinces can and have sidestepped those guidelines, but many still believe NACI serves an important role.
I think it would be very difficult for the provinces to do exactly what NACI is doing and the depth of analysis that NACI is doing.
They need the resources, supports, and probably even, the time to actually be a dynamic organization.
As for that canceled news conference, we're told NACI is expected to release finalized guidance on the AstraZeneca vaccine later this week. Michael Couture, Global News, Ottawa.
And we judge conspiracy theory people for being, COVIDiots and all these things.
For being smarter than you.
But really, when you look at that and you say, wait a second,
you're going to die.
We wonder why there is this deep divide in all of this information. Well, my friends, that's why there's a deep divide in all of it. You show me somebody who was trying to learn and educate themselves about vaccines who doesn't watch that happen and go, well, wait a second, now I'm going to wait a day. That's what happens. It fractures the confidence. It literally fractures the confidence. And as much as the conspiracy stuff, I'm not big on, but I get it. I get why people go down those rabbit holes of information on the internet. Because when you hear stuff like that, sometimes you can't just absolutely can't trust it. All right, we have so much more here. Oh my goodness, what are we going to do here? We have so much more to get into.
Yeah, conspiracy theories.
Let's get a couple more here before we're done with our all-night headlines, because there are a couple that are particularly important, I think, to get into. Number one is British Columbia tries, we're going to go down a couple there, Brennan. British Columbia tries to curb a COVID-19 surge by tightening travel rules. Alberta is seeing record high cases. So don't really blame them in BC for that one if the cases next door are super record high, although BC's have also been high too. Heather Urix West explains more.
After a long winter, Edmonton's Paul Chandler had been looking forward to a season of camping in BC.
It was a bit of a shock to see that they're locking down as hard as they are. I had plans to go there next week.
On Monday, the BC government announced restrictions limiting the movement of BC residents to within their own health zones and asking those from other provinces to stay away. We know that some of the new variants are more transmissible, and we're seeing more of those, particularly in the lower mainland. So part of our whole attempts now to focus more on preventing people from moving about is because we've seen that it is the travel between regions that can spread this.
It is the rise of the variants. First data was presented last week that suggested that it was 60% of the infections were variants. Probably this will rise.
Dr. Brian Conway says BC will likely need to implement more measures to get case counts under control. But the problem is not British Columbia's alone. Outside Ontario, Western Canadian provinces lead the country in active cases per capita. In Alberta, the number of patients in ICU has doubled since the beginning of the month.
We are now opening up surge beds because we are predictably getting 1 to 2 admissions every night of young people with COVID who require mechanical ventilation and ICU support.
In early April, Alberta restaurants were ordered to end indoor dining, and some fitness facilities had to close. But nearly 2 weeks later, the new measures have had little impact.
We're in a state now where you're about 1,500 cases per day in the province, and in our peak in the second wave, we're 1,900, and we're doubling every 1 to 2 weeks.
Alberta's Premier and Chief Medical Officer of Health have both said more restrictions could be coming if numbers continue to rise. The only question that remains is when. Heather Urix West, Global News, Calgary.
And that when is truly the case when everyone's looking at what's next for them, that's for sure. Okay, workplace outbreaks are partially behind Ontario's COVID-19 surge. As Eric Sorensen reports, some regions are not waiting for the province to take action as calls grow for the government to adopt a paid sick leave program for essential workers.
Peel became the first Ontario region, soon joined by Toronto, to close businesses temporarily that have 5 or more cases of COVID-19.
At last count, we have almost 400 workplace outbreaks in the region of Peel, so we really need to get ahead of these variants by closing, investigating, and then trying to make sure that those workers in our community stay safe.
At a big employer like Canada Post, cautious support among workers for additional safety measures.
The way things are going right now, I think it's the best bet.
It's best for the workers that can go home to recover. The only question remains, of course, is will they be paid sick leave benefits?
A growing chorus has been calling for paid sick leave benefits as Ontario doctors ferry patients between hospitals and as bed space has expanded in 2 field hospitals. Even the co-chair of the science table that advises the government has called out the government.
People should not have to choose between keeping food on the table and keeping others safe by staying home.
Today, the science table issued a public statement that Ontario is facing its most challenging health crisis, calling for essential workplaces only to be open and that essential workers should be paid to stay home when they are sick, exposed, or need time to get vaccinated.
The paid sick leave, the most important measure to have a developed country like Canada without paid sick leave seems unbelievable.
Ontario did have paid sick leave. 2 years ago, the Ford government repealed a law that included 2 paid sick days, a law the Premier then declared was a job killer.
We want to make sure that Ontario is open for business.
That was then. Now?
What they need is paid sick days, paid time off when they're sick.
Pounded by the opposition, the government said it hoped the federal budget would help out, but now the province is signaling it may bring in paid sick leave.
I want to assure every worker out there that we have their backs and we're going to be there for them until we defeat COVID-19.
Paid sick days only make sense to those working in congregate settings.
People, they get scared when they don't have an income, so it forces them to go to work, even though they know they're probably feeling symptoms or they're not well.
If essential workers are paid to stay home when they're sick, epidemiologists say it will make a difference. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
All right, 877-399-9898. Your good news. What is your good news? Share your good news, my friends, whatever it is. Pass it on. Phone calls are welcome. Texts are welcome, too. We get your good news and some good news stories next. It's The Shift.
For 100 years. And so for me, that was a very compelling idea. So we decided to do this house that way.
Oh shit, we're gonna.
Jack, you couldn't draw a crowd as big as this if you were a gutter on New Year's Eve.
Oh, I couldn't, eh?
With running water, I'll throw that in.
Now, listen, Fred. You're here to work, so take off your coat and let's go.
Now, wait a minute, Jack. Before we start this Punch and Benny show, there's something we've got to straighten out right now.
What's that, Fred?
I'm not going to open my mouth on this program except to yawn until you give me what you promised me last week.
But I promised you.
No, now, don't play possum, Benny. Hand over that Boy Scout knife.
Oh, yes, I knew you'd remember that. All right, here it is. Wait till I take the chain off.
I want the knife, chain, and everything that goes with it.
Oh, I suppose you even want this Elks tooth.
No, you can put that back in your mouth.
Well, here's the knife, Fred. Take it and consider our deal closed.
Now, wait a minute. You're not rushing me into this thing. Let me see if this knife's in good condition. There's the big blade. There's the corkscrew, the fingernail file. There's the ping-pong paddle. The bottle opener. Hey, what's this thing here?
That's a folding bed. Are you satisfied?
Well, I guess it's all right. But, well, Jack, my mood changes here.
Yes.
Coming in the mood now. Have you been having a good time in New York? Have you seen any of the shows or anything?
Yes, Fred. I saw the Ed Wynn show. That was swell. I saw George M. Cohan show. That was grand. And then I saw your picture. My mood changes here.
There wasn't an S on that well by any chance. Well, what about it?
Nothing, Fred.
Time to prepare for something new with self-guided lessons and support. Magoosh.com.
Then the junk disappeared, but the sparkle sound came a little bit late. So I said, you should probably make that sparkle sound a little bit quicker.
And then what happened?
And then Charlotte materialized out of thin air and said,
never hesitate to trade your cow for a handful of magic beans.
How did you know that?
BBC World Service, Lawrence Pollard and Claire McDonald.
Coming up in the next half-hour, more reaction to the guilty verdict for the Minneapolis police officer who killed George Floyd, sparking protests around the world.
Also talking about the death of Chad's President Idris Deby and what it means for the country and the wider region.
And we'll hear why Burkina Faso is doing so well in the fight against deforestation and climate change. They've gone back to ancient farming techniques.
BBC News with David Harper. President Biden has urged Americans to come together to confront systemic racism after a white former police officer was found guilty of murdering George Floyd. Mr. Biden said the conviction of Derek Chauvin could be a giant step forward in the march towards justice in America. His vice president...
Everyone, your safety is our number...
Hey, well, listen to me, you Nougatine Jeeves. One more word out of you and you'll be buckling in a shroud.
Don't let him scare you, Rochester.
I ain't scared.
That's the stuff.
Wait a minute. What is a shroud? A shroud, my untutored friend, is a windbreaker for a ghost.
Oh, make way for a cow. Rochester, you see, Fred and I'll probably have to get a new butler.
Well, hello there, Fred. Well, Harry Bonzell, what are you doing in the enemy's camp here?
Well, I came here to help Jack out tonight. He needed an announcer.
Oh, is he going to pay you?
Certainly not. He's doing it as a favor. Of course, I will buy him a necktie or something.
What do you mean, something?
Something cheaper and shut up.
I thought so. Benny, you're so tight. You've not only got the first dollar you ever earned, you've got the guy's right arm who handed it to you.
Well, it was loose. Let me tell you something, Alan.
Hey, pipe down, fellas. You're upsetting me.
Oh, are we bothering you?
Yeah, why don't you two guys be debonair?
Abe, if you say debonair once more, I'm going to ask you what it means.
Well, how will you know?
Of ongoing good health and safety conditions. All workers deserve a safe place to work. On Wednesday, April 28th, let's pause to remember those lost or hurt on the job. And
Producer Jim Steinman has died at the age of 73. He achieved his greatest fame with the rock star.
Well, if I did reduce it a little, my right name wasn't so long.
It wasn't. Why, your name was so long it used to take 15 minutes to write it in shorthand. And then they had to send the pencil over to the Mayo brothers for relaxation.
You should talk. When you were in vaudeville, they had to put your right name on a rubber marquee.
Now, that's vulcanized slander, Benny.
Why, you weather-beaten gargoyle.
Go on there, Mr. B.
I'll throw you out of here so fast you look like a jockey on a skyrocket.
Now, that's enough, Benny. One more crack, and I'll hit you on top of your head so hard, you'll think your feet are bookends for your head.
I'm glad you loused that one up.
I'm taking my Boy Scout knife and getting out of here.
This is some good news. All right, so you tell us.
Let's begin in the US then, where in the last few hours, a jury has found a former police officer guilty of murder over the death.
What is it, Abe?
Here's your knife back.
My knife? How'd you get it away from Alan?
My flute player bumped into him.
Oh, boy, that's marvelous. Thanks.
You want his watch, too?
Never mind. Play it.
Forced by the police. Mr. Chauvin was found guilty on 3 charges: second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and manslaughter. He will remain in custody until he is sentenced and could spend decades in jail. Jeffrey Kramer is a former assistant U.S. attorney and an expert on the criminal justice system. I caught up with him a short time ago and asked him for his reaction to those verdicts.
It's not really a surprise. I thought the prosecution case was pretty streamlined. The evidence was pretty compelling. I think the interesting part, which we can talk about, is the fact that there were police witnesses against this defendant. That's unusual in these kind of cases.
Do you think that's what tipped the balance?
You know, I think it might have. If there wasn't police witnesses who testified for the prosecution to the fact that the defendant used too much force, I think it would have been a longer trial. I think we would have seen some defense experts who perhaps testify that there was a proper amount of force. But I think once that was done, there was really nowhere for the defense to go. There was no argument they could make, and therefore this verdict was.
Oh, as gunshots. Celebrate that good news, Brendan. Good news! Good news! All of this good news. I love it. 877-399-9898. Good news Tuesday-ish here on The Shift. Let's get to a good news story that's going to make us feel awesome. Longtime hockey coach in Trail, Ken Koshi, has been recognized for, get this, 47 years of teaching the game that he loves. This is Squire Barnes.
I hope he does.
Backwards! I said backwards! Backwards! Stay back!
Around a camcorder with him on their phone.
Backwards. See, 47 years told me nothing if he's doing it wrong.
Was very compelling. It was hard to look at that and, frankly, not convict the defendant.
What does this change then, do you think, as far as deaths at the hands of the police force of African Americans? Do things change from this point onwards?
You know, I'd like to say that this is a watershed moment and that things will change from here on in. I don't think I can say that. I think it's a pivotal prosecution. I think it'll give moments of pause to officers in the future. But, you know, given my experience and even just the recent events that have happened to the U.S., I think it would be naive to think this will never happen again. But having said that, I think what you will see is other officers not willing just to go along with a rogue officer and take the fall, because what you're going to see is the other officers involved in this, they're going to get prosecuted. So I think that's a takeaway from this. You're still going to see incidents, I think more the shooting incidents that happen, but perhaps not a 9-minute, torture video, which is what we saw here. Hopefully those are less frequent because of this.
So the actual dismantling of systemic racism, because we've had this comment from President Biden, systemic racism stains the nation's soul. There is much, much further to go on that one, in your opinion.
Absolutely. I mean, there have been reforms made in the United States and other countries, police reforms, with respect to hiring and with respect to training and with respect to mental health available to officers. I think all that is crucial and is necessary. Systemic racism, you can do some things about by definition if you change the system. However, you're still dealing with people, and getting rid of racism within individuals, that's nothing a government can do. That's nothing a law can change. That's human nature to some extent, and then that's what needs to be worked on.
More excuses.
This text with no name comes from Ontario. It says, getting my first shot in the morning. Not good news, but great news. Absolutely, I want to celebrate that one. You got it. Good news! All of the good news is absolutely worth celebrating on Good News Tuesday-ish. All right, so more of your text messages here. Good news, I tried the new 7-Eleven Classic Crispy Chicken Sandwich. I wasn't expecting much. Turns out it was juicy and delicious and cheaper than all the other new sandwiches from Popeyes, KFC, etc. I went back and got another one.
Wow, 7-Eleven has a crispy. I actually know, I'm not surprised anymore. It seems every week we have a story about 7-Eleven trying something ridiculous and it actually working. So yeah, I would try that.
I know lots of people say that they really look forward to their food. They thoroughly enjoy their food. So, well, good news. Thank you, Josie, for that one. Kat in Gimli, I've got a writing gig and I'm getting good reviews so far. Writing makes me happy. Good news to celebrate that too, Brendan. Good news! All right, so we also have good news. After working 13 straight, I finally get the next 2 days off. Thank Jeebus Murphy. Murpty on the text. I love that. Good news, I made a healthy Mediterranean-style dinner, invited my offspring, and caught up in an outside picnic.
We could use bandanas to mask our faces, then hit the trail for Dawson right after. Yeah, we'll think it over, Squint. Well, let's get moving, Lefty. I'm getting cold. Yeah.
When they arrived in Selkirk, Lefty and his two companions stayed at a waterfront hotel and made plans for the cafe holdup. On Saturday night, they stopped their dog team alongside the building. And then, using bandanas as masks, the three men entered.
Now, hold up. Line up all here and reach for the ceiling.
Fellas, go get the cash and gold and make it quick.
Sure, Lefty. Come on. Right. Hey, he called the leader Lefty. Must be Lefty Nash. Don't let them get away with this, man. Get him. Get him out.
The sudden retaliation by the men in the cafe took the crooks by surprise. Lefty saw both Squint and Art fall wounded, and his one thought was to escape. Emptying his gun, he turned and fled, slamming the door behind him.
Hear that perfect door hardware?
A few minutes later, the man from the cafe entered the office of young Constable Denny Carter.
Working around the world with Health and Human Services, focused on diversity and inclusion.
I met you when you were 5 years old, and I knew back then that you were going to change the world. You continue to break down barriers. Why is that so important to you?
I believe that I could make a difference by including all people to be part of the mainstream.
Trail the one who got away. Constable, I know this is your first assignment being constable here in Selkirk. Let me warn you, the fellow who got away is thought to be Lefty Nash, a desperate killer. It's my job to trail him and bring him in for murder. Better wait till you have help then. No. Delay might take away any chance of catching him. I'll send word to the constable of Bill Lanning to watch my district while I'm gone. You have any idea which way the killer went? I'd say he was heading north. I'll try to pick up his trail. And I'll not come back until I catch him and bring him in.
An hour later, the constable, Denny Carter, picked up Lefty's trail and started out in pursuit.
Hush! Hush, you husky! Hush!
It was later that night when Sergeant Preston of the Northwest Mounted Police and his great dog, Yukon King, arrived in Selkirk. Preston's first stop was at the general store.
Husky! Oh, you husky! Come on!
Come along, fella.
Well, Sergeant Preston and King, I'm mighty glad to see
you. Picked up the month because Dad was at my backyard.
You were never afraid, Nicole?
Isn't? Why, no, we just arrived and stopped off here first.
Well, some crooks tried to hold up the cafe earlier. 2 of them were wounded and caught. The other one got away. Huh? But before he left, he killed a fellow at the cafe. Then he left to trail him, saying he wouldn't come back without the murder.
I wish I'd arrived sooner.
Sure. To my way of thinking, young Constable Denny is risking his neck going after such a desperate character as Lefty Nash.
Lefty Nash? You mean Denny is trailing Lefty Nash?
That he is, Sergeant.
That is serious. I'll take supplies, Frank, and I'm picking up Denny's trail right away. I must get to him before he catches up with Nash.
I hope you do. Hey, look, Sergeant, let me go with you. I might be of help before you're through.
No, all right, but let's hurry. I don't want to waste time. Within a short time, Sergeant Preston and Frank picked up Denny's trail near the cafe. With the great dog King leading the way, they started out the North Trail.
On King! On you, Husky! I'm glad you decided to try to catch up to Denny. Nash is a desperate killer, and Denny isn't experienced enough.
It isn't that exactly, Frank. Tell me, you remember the widow Carter who came here and opened a boarding house some years ago?
Sure I do. It was about 12 years, as I recollect. I just opened up a small trading post. She was Denny's mother.
Denny was with her at the time, but she wasn't his mother.
She wasn't?
No. Mrs. Carter applied for adoption papers for Denny. One of my first assignments as a rookie was to interview her.
Say, I remember now. You came in and asked me about her at the time and said she wanted to adopt the boy who was staying with her.
That's right. Well, it seems before that, Denny's mother lived at Mrs. Carter's place in Vancouver. She died. Mrs. Carter kept Denny, brought him here when she moved to Selkirk. He took the name Denny Carter.
Does he know he's an adopted son?
Yes. That's all he does know about it, Frank. But I learned from Mrs. Carter before she died that Denny's father was named Lefty Nash.
Lefty Nash, eh? Well, now, Lefty Nash, you say? Great saints.
He must never know, so keep it to yourself.
Of course. You know, I'd never mentioned it.
Why'd you tell me?
Us going to, so does your good news. Pass it on. We're going to come back with more and a perspective for you on getting a vaccine that I think you might enjoy next in the shift.
Canada's brightest conversation in the dark of night. It's The Shift with Shane Hewitt.
This is dog sled chase music.
Before they meet. On time! On you, Husky!
Meantime, about 2 miles ahead of Denny, Lefty Nash turned off the trail and stopped behind a low ridge.
Oh, you mangy mutts. Guess I have to give you a rest if I hope to make it to Dawson.
Lefty took a blanket and moved under a ledge where he lay down to rest. He was out of the cold wind. The warmth of the blanket caused him to doze for a while. But later, a distant sound brought him to full consciousness, and he sat up suddenly.
Dogs. Somebody must be trailing me. Just light enough for anyone to see my tracks leading in here. I'd better get going away from here and fast.
All right, you lazy hounds, up! You Husky!
A short time later, Denny reached the point where Lefty had turned and gone to the ridge. He stopped his dog team a moment.
Ho there! Turned off here and went toward that ridge. I'll leave the team here and go on foot. He'll try to ambush me if he hears the team moving in.
With gun in hand, Denny followed the tracks. He cautiously approached the place where Lefty had stopped. Then, as he eased around the end of the ridge, he saw that no one was there.
He stopped here to rest. There's where the dogs burrowed in the snow. Something over there. He left a blanket behind, and it still has warmth. It means he isn't very far ahead of me. I'll get back to the team.
Meanwhile, Sergeant Preston and Frank were making much better time than Denny had because the intelligent Husky King kept them on the trail.
Do you think Denny caught up with him yet, Sergeant?
I doubt it, Frank. I hope not.
That's the way I feel about it.
If he presses Lefty, he may run into an ambush. I hope he realizes that.
I hate to think of anything like that happening.
So do I.
On King! On you, Husky!
We'll con...
Why are you doing this? If you're not doing this to stretch yourself, to stretch culture in some way, then why bother? You know, entertaining people matters, but moving people and moving things forwards matters even more. And actually, you can have both. So
why be an actor when I could be a
really
truck driver?
Back to, I guess, the core of what drives me, and I hope that's something I'm able to take forwards, in this moment in my career and beyond, is to kind of pick roles that do those things and take me out of my comfort zone, and hopefully take audiences out of their comfort zone.
Riz Ahmed's presence in the Oscars race will of course be broadcast to millions who tune in to watch the ceremony. To see a leading man who is a Muslim within reach of taking home Hollywood's biggest acting accolade certainly sends a powerful message. And with a Korean American and African American also in the Best Actor race this year, the evidence suggests that the film industry may indeed be becoming significantly more inclusive.
Tom Brooke with that report from...
Together, find out how at abaca.ca.
With extensive experience in both family law and business law, Brian Ludmer, author of The High Conflict Custody Battle, offers a better perspective on solutions so that your children don't suffer in the process.
It was condemned, of course, by fans, football authorities. We've been talking about it so much on the programme this week, including government ministers. We've even had royalty condemning it as well across the UK and also Europe, UEFA, league associations, all having their say. The teams that are left in it at the moment are Italian sides, AC Milan, Inter Milan, Juventus, and the Spanish side, Atletico Madrid, Barcelona, and Real Madrid. The BBC Sports editor Dan Rowan joins us now. He's the busiest man at the BBC. Broke this story last night. The Mail here in the UK, Dan, has the headline, "They think it's all over. It is now." How could the Big Six so spectacular
today?
Oh, what the... Come on, get up, you weak-kneed coyote. Get moving, do you hear?
My thunder out. What's the use? They're no good to me now. Hey, someone's still on my trail. Must be up mounted. They use good dogs. I'll have to make it on foot. I'll move that hill off to the right.
Lefty went over the hill and found a long stretch of level, snow-covered land before him.
That's what we can go get and when we can go get them. So what we wanted to do, because there have been so many numbers that have been tossed about, was to talk about it this way. And in this way, I think it'll help you understand. So I want you to think back. In your mind's eye, think back to when you graduated. Maybe it's a grad party, high school dance, whatever it was. This is how old you used to be, have to be in most provinces to get your vaccine. This is one of the songs that you were partying to at your high school grad.
Moved closer to the fleeing killer. He noticed that Lefty had swung to the right and was making for what appeared to be some large boulders.
You better try to cut him off or he'll be able to hold me back indefinitely.
Then he too swung off at an angle and increased his pace in hopes of cutting in between Lefty and the place to which the killer was heading. In his determination to outwit Lefty, Denny kept his eyes on the fleeing crook, neglecting to watch the nearby terrain. Suddenly, he felt the ground give way under him as a thin crust over a narrow ravine broke under his weight. Then the young body was flung downward to the bottom of the narrow ravine and lay there stunned. Lefty, who was about a city block away from the young Mountie, turned as Denny yelled and saw the red-coated figure disappear from sight.
Hey, Jiminy, he must have stepped down to a crust covering a ravine back there. I'd go back and I could finish him off and get his dog team. And that's what I'll do. Guns ready.
It took Lefty, in his winded condition, quite some time to reach the edge of the ravine where Denny had fallen. Finally, he moved cautiously to the edge and looked down.
He's just coming to. Hey, you down there. I got you covered.
I lost my gun. I'm unarmed.
Good. That makes it easier. I'm gonna plug you and then go back and take your dog team, Mountie.
Now, wait, listen to me.
Lefty watched as Denny struggled to his feet. The young man's parka hood had fallen back, and Denny brushed the snow out of his hair with his gloved hand, then looked upward at the leering killer above. A thin beam of sunlight struck the thick, curly, reddish-brown hair and lighted his youthful face as he spoke.
Oh, I sprained an ankle when I fell. Help me up. I can't volley any further. I wouldn't leave you here to die.
You'll die before I leave, fella. Hey, it seems to me you've been mixed up in my life before this somewhere.
No, I haven't.
You sure look familiar, but that doesn't matter. Too cold to stand here gabbing with a Mountie. Right now,
Lefty raised his gun again, then hesitated. He looked down at the boyish face staring up at him, at the large, steady brown eyes just a few feet below the edge of the ravine. Lefty brushed a hand across his face as the gun wavered in his grasp.
Lefty, I came after you because you killed a man in Selkirk. Maybe you killed others, I don't know. And now you intend to kill me. But you can't win, Lefty. The past will catch up with you and you'll be hanged sooner or later.
Lefty didn't answer, but stood as if in a trance. The young Mountie spoke of the past. And it was the past Lefty was reminded of as he looked at Denny. Of someone he knew.
Every day. There's probably a VHS tape involved. Okay, so for one last little piece of context for you, this is how old you are now.
Government threatened legislation yesterday to block this proposal, that perhaps going forward, one outcome can be that fans are more involved.
Vaccinations are happening, and this is the music of your
Sweat in spite of the cold, moaning wind. Lefty shivered as the wind seemed to bring thoughts of the past. Thoughts of when he was with his young wife and child.
Gosh, honey, isn't he some boy, though? Look at him. Only 2 years old, yet as strong and smart as a 5-year-old. Someday he'll grow up to look just like me. You wait and see.
Lefty closed his eyes a moment. And then his confused mind took him back to the time he was leaving home.
Oh, look, Mary, honey, it's for you and our boy, my son, Denny. I'll make a fortune in gold in California, and then I'll come back or I'll send for you. Please, honey, you must understand. It's for you and for him that I'm going. No, I don't want to think back.
You're not going to shoot. Help me out. You're feverish, Lefty. Talking to yourself. You'll die too if you're sick.
Sick? What are you talking about? I'm just thinking. That's all. I don't want to make any slip and have more Mounties after me. Anyhow, I'd like to watch you squirm.
But Lefty saw the young man below him wasn't squirming. He seemed not to be afraid, as if he knew somehow that Lefty couldn't quite pull the trigger. Then an inner voice seemed to whisper to him, an inner voice forced into his mind by the moaning wind.
You down there, Lefty. You